Hi, I'm Jeff Kaszerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of IssuesWatch Live. I'm joined today by Tim Sullivan. He's the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. The EDA is a key player in helping businesses get through this coronavirus crisis. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeff. Great to be with you. Great to be with all the members.
Just a quick note to our members, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat and we will try to address them during the broadcast. So let's get this going, Tim. So here's the first question I have, which is sort of a general question. Can you tell us what the role of the EDA is in supporting New Jersey businesses, not just now during this crisis, but also in more quote unquote normal economic times?
Yeah, sure. So again, first of all, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, the chance to visit with everyone, tell you a little bit about what we're up to and what we're focused on, and hopefully get some feedback and some good questions as well. Yeah, I think the EDA, particularly under Governor Murphy's leadership in the last couple of years, has really broadened its focus to include two really big areas of support. One is support for small business in a comprehensive way. Again, these predate the crisis. Support for small business through lending, through advocacy, through troubleshooting of government programs, those kinds of initiatives, as well and access to capital, as well as innovation and entrepreneurship. Really trying to reignite the state's innovation engine, help create more new companies, more companies that scale from small to large to add significant job creation. As we think about our role in the crisis, I think, as we go through phases of this crisis, in these relatively early days, and I regret to say it's still early days in this crisis, we've been really focused on trying to help stabilize small business. So we've had a package of programs. Happy to talk about those in more detail now or later. Really just designed to be a source of stabilization and support for small business to get through this hopefully worst part of the crisis.
Okay, I guess this dovetails with the first question. So what role do you see the EDA playing in getting New Jersey businesses back on track and getting the state economy hopefully humming again, as we go through this coronavirus? I usually either say emergency or crisis, but neither of them are very positive terms. Maybe more specifically, some of the things you do.
Yeah, so back at the end of March or early April, I forget, lose track of time like everybody else is these days, the governor announced a package of programs to support small business that were all funded by the EDA, a grant program, a zero interest loan program, support for CDFIs, the community development finance institutions that are great partners for us in ordinary times and in this time as well as an entrepreneur support program, as basically a guarantee program to support emergency loans for equity funded companies as well. And so we're in the process of administering those programs. They were significantly oversubscribed. The grant program, for example, was a $5 million program, which meant we thought we could serve between 1,500 and 2,000 businesses, depending on how many, what size the applications were. We have 34,000 and change applications, so good 17x oversubscribed on that one. And we thought that was quite oversubscribed until we ran the loan program, which was a $10 million program. We got 250 million worth of applications, so 25x oversubscription in that program. So I think that only speaks to and underscores the degree of pain and dislocation that there is in the economy. You mentioned sort of getting us back on our front foot and getting us humming again. And I think there's two dimensions and phases of this. One is the immediate recovery that comes from restarting, that comes from the stay-at-home orders being relaxed as we go here, some of the activities being allowed. And if you may have seen just a few minutes ago, the governor, it was let to be known in the press that in an hour or so he's going to make some announcements around construction and curbside retail and a few other things to begin to ease up a little bit on some of these restrictions, which I 100% support because they're necessary from a public health perspective. So there's the getting back to something like normal, and then there's the dealing with the reality that this coronavirus has caused what seems to be like it's going to be a really bad recession around the globe. And we are by no means immune from that here. If you look at the CBO numbers nationwide, they're projecting double-digit unemployment at the nationwide level through the end of at least 2021.
Wow.
So that's going to cause a whole bunch of ripple effects. I'd say so far what I have observed, and I'm sure your members and you've seen this as well, coronavirus has created some new problems. It's also exacerbated some long-standing problems. So small business access to capital, particularly for minority and women-owned firms, immigrant-owned firms, veteran-owned firms, LGBT-owned firms, it was not good enough before. It's worse now, and that problem is more acute now. There's new problems too, like how do you maintain social distancing in a manufacturing scenario and keep them open? How do you think about remote working for an extended period of time? How do you think about distance learning, which by the way is a challenge for the kids, but it's an opportunity for the economy because that's not, ed tech is going to explode in the next couple of months and years here. So I think there's two dimensions. There's an immediate term, and then there's sort of a longer term, and they're both really important.
Yeah. At first when this whole thing started and we all had to go home, I was thinking, okay, won't be so bad. Yeah, we'll be stuck inside, but the workload should slow down. I mean, what's there to do? Well, I was quite wrong about that. So did funding for some of these EDA programs, like the loans and grants you just mentioned, that were started, I don't know, 2 months or whatever, and then sold out, so to speak, in I think it was a couple hours. Did funding for those programs come from the CARES Act money?
No, we actually stood those programs up. I think we approved them the day Congress voted for the CARES Act, and so it's
Okay.
these are all funded by the state essentially through the EDA. We're not an appropriated agency. We don't get a budget from the state every year, but we of course manage taxpayer dollars, and so yeah, it's EDA resources so far.
Okay. And well, this is looking, I guess, in a crystal ball, but if Congress, if the Senate goes along with giving money, CARES Act type money to the states and cities and so on, would some of that, I assume, would be available for the EDA? Actually, another maybe more important question is, can more of the CARES Act, or can any of the CARES Act money that we already got be used for EDA programs?
The short answer is it looks like it does fit within the guidance. That's a decision the governor's going to have to make, and the challenge there is that there's way more needs than there are resources. So certainly there's
Right.
needs and demand on the small business side, but all across the government, at both the state level and the county and local level, significant demands for any federal funding right now. And the CARES Act money is not enough. I think there's going to have to be a balance of lots of priorities, and I don't envy those. Primarily the governor has to make those kinds of decisions, because
Right.
there's way more needs than there are sources of capital to fill them. Because if you think about the tiering of the crises here, first and foremost, of course, this is a public health crisis, and you're seeing,
Yep.
Approaching, more than 9,000 deaths in the state, and approaching, I think we clicked over 80,000 nationwide. Terrible suffering on the human side. So first and foremost, it's a public health crisis. Second, it's an economic crisis. You see 1 million unemployment filings in New Jersey, and tens of millions across the state. It's an economic crisis. Not surprisingly, it's therefore a fiscal crisis for the states and for the cities and towns as well. And so stretching scarce resources to make the kind of investments we need in recovery is ultimately going to be a federal question, because the states are not going to be able to solve this themselves.
Right. So let's shift a little bit here, Tim, and talk about the Restart and Recovery Advisory Council.
Yep.
I know you're a co-chair of the council, and obviously restarting the state's economy is on the minds of our members and really everybody in the state, I think, especially when you have 1 million unemployed people. In a survey, this is kind of interesting, in a survey that of our members that we recently did, more than 65% were surveyed said that getting a timeline to allow businesses to reopen will help small businesses more than any kind of economic relief. So in other words, getting a timeline down is more important than a loan or a grant. So putting that aside, what is the role of the council in developing a plan to reopen the state? And when, if you know, do you expect the council to start submitting recommendations?
Oh, they've been started. They didn't need our permission to start sending recommendations in. So we've been getting lots of good feedback. You look at a couple things. One, the role of the council, which I'm honored to co-chair with Zacchaeus Methellis, who's the Secretary of Higher Education, Jose Lozano, who's the co-chair, who's the CEO of Choose New Jersey, is really an opportunity to do two things. One, take in input for exactly what you just described, getting suggestions of, the New Jersey economy is diverse and complex, probably as diverse and complex as anywhere in the country. And so there's no one size fits all solution. Even if you said, let's talk about restaurants. Well, there's a big difference between an Applebee's in a mall and a diner by the side of the highway and, a beachside, bar or restaurant. There's an infinite variety of, just within the restaurant world in New Jersey, There's infinite variety. And that's great. It's part of what makes it great to live here. And so making sure we've got really close on the ground feedback for, well, if you say something that makes sense for, a big open format restaurant, maybe it doesn't work for a different kind of restaurant. And so making sure we're taking that feedback in is really important. It's also an opportunity for us to get some along the way response to the policies that are being developed, because ultimately the decisions are going to be made by the governor under executive orders or in partnership with the legislature and legislative leadership as it relates to laws. And those are they're going to have to make their decisions based on a number of inputs, but it's an opportunity to kind of road test ideas. The idea of a timeline, I would somewhat reframe the question a little bit. I think Anthony Fauci said that the disease gives you the timeline and then you have to react to it. But I think what's really important as we go forward here, if I was a business owner or a business, a person making decisions about how to run a business in the real world, in the private sector, is having some framework for how decisions are going to get made. Because obviously the most important set of decisions are the ones right in front of our face around when do you begin to reopen from this most extreme period of social distancing. And that's really important. But we also got to live with the reality that this is, until there's a vaccine or a therapeutic of some sort, there's going to be a lot of known unknowns about timelines. And it's really challenging because it's not just what's going to happen in, June, July, but what happens in the fall? What happens with, what's the transit framework going to be from a density perspective? What's the childcare and school system framework going to be? I don't know the answers to those questions, by the way. But they're going to be huge inputs into what the overall capacity is going to be. And so having a framework that's out there, so if people say, we're seeing certain kinds of conditions, but it's possible we're going to switch back to this mode, I think is going to be an important set of guideposts to have out there. And that's not something that's ready for prime time yet, but something we are working on.
Right. It feels a little to me, I've never been in a war or a civilian in a war, but it kind of seems to me a little bit like that's what we're going through. We're stuck in our houses, can't go out, but that's just my big imagination working. So the business community is urging swift passage of a bill, Assembly Bill 4030, that would establish the employment and business-related tax deferral assistance program in the EDA to allow small businesses to defer the payment and remittance of certain employment and business-related taxes during this crisis. Can you tell us some more about this bill? And since it's something that would go to your agency, is that because your agency would be, in a sense, paying these taxes until businesses are back on their feet? I just seemed a little unusual to me. Of course, I don't know much about the bill, why it ended up going into drafted around the EDA. So enough of me. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
I don't know a ton much more than sounds like you do, Jeff, because it's a proposal at this point from the legislature. And one of the surefire ways for me to get in trouble in my job is to comment on pending legislation that hasn't been passed yet.
Okay.
But that being said, I would tell you, I was it would be a change of focus for EDA to administer a broad-based kind of as of right tax deferral program.
Right.
We run a number of tax credit programs that get a fair bit of attention, a little bit less these days in the crisis than they were before, but whether it's the GROW program or ERG or BEEP or BRAG, those are broad-based programs, but even in GROW, which was a really broad-based program, that was 400 or something applications that came in. A program that was, as you just described, it would impact tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of businesses. Those are usually, if they were to be passed, usually administered by someone like taxation.
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So obviously we'll do what the governor directs us to do, what the legislature directs us to do, but that would be a change of the number of kinds of customers that we deal with, put it that way.
Right. Okay. So we know, as I think you said before, that within one day, the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program and the Small Business Emergency Assistance Loan Program were sold out. Do you expect there to be another round of these programs on the horizon, sort of like how the PPP went through phase 1 and phase 2? Or, and if not, or you're not sure, are there any other financial assistance programs that the EDA offers to businesses that maybe nobody knows about, or that they can still use even if those two programs are oversold?
Yes, short answer is I am unsure what the future holds there. I think we've been on the hunt for additional resources. We said we did something very unusual, but fully lawful, which is that we can take donations from, if big businesses want to support small business in this time, we can actually take donations in. People don't usually like to donate money to the government. That's I don't need to tell CPAs about the degrees to which people avoid donating to the government. But it's a thing you can do if you wish to in this narrow scenario. And we'll see what federal resources become available. The good news is we've got a program that's built and the pipes and the plumbing to run programs if more funding does become available.
Right. I
would tell you that to your exact question, we do have a whole suite of small business programs, primarily on the lending side. They're not quite as generous and kind of emergency flavored as the 0% 10-year note program. But we have a number of programs that are on our website, NJEDA.com. We have a direct lender program. We can loan up to $2 million for capital equipment, $750,000 for working capital needs. Again, that's a more traditional non-emergency type program. So it's got a more real interest rate, and it's got a shorter tenor and those kinds of things. But those exist. I would encourage folks to check out our small business tools that exist in the world generally.
Okay. Anything else before we conclude that you think our members should know about the EDA and the role that it's playing now to help businesses through this emergency?
I think we're all ears for ideas. I mean, I think that we have no misunderstanding of that we don't have a monopoly on good ideas. So if there's ideas for new programs we could be running or new initiatives we can be advocating for, happy to play that role and take that feedback in, either sort of via the EDA or via this council that I've got the privilege of working on. Okay,
well, that wraps it up for our broadcast. Tim, thanks for joining us and taking time out of, I'm sure, what must be a crazy, hectic schedule to answer our questions and share some important information with our members. Really great to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me on. Great to talk with you, Jeff, and we'll talk soon.
Right. Thank you. We want to thank all of you for joining us today. Hopefully you found this helpful and informative. Our next broadcast will be on June 4th at noon. Two noted economists, Jim Hughes from Rutgers University and Danny Bachman from Deloitte, the CPA firm, will examine the short and long-term effects of the coronavirus pandemic on both the New Jersey and national economies. This event is free for NJCPA members and provides 1 CPE credit. So you can register for this event and access additional coronavirus-related news and resources at njcpa.org/coronavirus. And we hope you have a great day. And as we've been saying all the time during this emergency, please stay healthy and safe. Thank you for joining us.